And our human instinct is to run. If we're cavemen and we hear a rustle in the bushes and we stand there to calculate the probability of it being a lion, we got eaten. Those species of humans did not survive. We just ran. And in investing, it's that same tendency that, while from an evolutionary standpoint was super helpful, is the exact opposite of what you want to be doing with your investments.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Man of Mastery podcast, where we are putting purpose and passion into action, pursuing self-mastery in service to others. This is episode 47 with fund manager Peter Lazaroff. Look, guys, it's been definitely a crazy week, a crazy world for a couple weeks now, but there is so much to be thankful and grateful for. I think this is a great time to really stop and reflect on all that we do have, the time we can spend with family, friends, use this time to reconnect to others, reconnect to our lives and our routines and what really matters. And in that spirit, I want to say again, as always, I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate you being here, listening, and spending some time with me and with my guests each week. Today's episode, as I mentioned, 47. So you'll find show notes and Peter Lazaroff's contact information, website, his financial quiz we'll talk about, Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff at manofmastery.com/047. Now, another thing I want to talk about before we jump in is something new I'm launching, a course, a training course, an interactive set of sessions called Performance Kickstart. Performance Kickstart. This thing is kicking off here later in April, and it is 7 weeks, 7 modules, 7 sets of topics, tools, techniques around the best practices really in performance, in human development, and really elite level life performance. In fact, it's going to be probably 8 weeks. I'm going to throw in an 8th week to really make sure that people head off with their own personalized plan, doctrine, whatever you want to call it, and carry that momentum and that consistency forward. So it's going to be live sessions, you'll have assignments, you'll have challenges, and I think we'll really walk away from that with some huge momentum, some huge differences, and some things to carry forward. If you want to see more about that, you can go to the website, manofmastery.com/kickstart. So just type in manofmastery.com/kickstart and learn more about what that contains and what that's all about. Like I said, April 24th is a Friday. We're going to kick it off, do weekly sessions. And I think I'm going to take max of maybe 8 guys into this. I'm just looking for a small group of high quality, motivated individuals who are really looking to step up their game, make use of the time that we probably have on our hands right now during the lockdown, and just do whatever they can do to tweak or kickstart or take it to the next level on how they're showing up every day for themselves, for their families, for their tribes, for the people around them. So this thing it's kicking off at a ridiculously deep discount to what I think I'll charge down the road, but I'm doing that for a couple reasons. One, we've all got some time on our hands, and I think this is a great way to serve each other. 2, I'm looking for the kind of guys that are willing to pioneer this thing along with me. All right. And 3, it's really not just about the money. It's the effort you've got to put into it as well. And you get out what you put in. So it's not just about the financial cost of it. It is investing in yourself with effort, with time, with focus, and really taking things seriously to pay yourself back in the end. All right. Now, great. So today, Peter Lazaroff, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about his book, but his book really in context to what he does as a fund manager, and how timely, right? With the craziness and the volatility in the financial markets. We recorded this thing in early March. So this was an interview we did probably the week before coronavirus, COVID-19, became declared a pandemic. So even then, things were really starting to ramp up, but had not really hit the level of craziness of hitting the markets that we've seen just over the last couple weeks. But Nonetheless, we do get into talking about fear and our biological response to fear and how it is really tough to reconcile that with the best things that we should do as an investor and as we look at markets that are swinging around like they are right now. We also talk about our kids, about financial educations, about the fact that kids are not going to get educated about money in high school or college. So Peter talks to us about how we should talk to our kids about money, what they should see in us as how we treat money and how we spend money, and the kind of leadership that we should exemplify around money and finances. And then another topic that we touched on, which I thought was super interesting, is not only about how Peter thinks about saving and accumulating and investing and growing money for later, like retirement, but we talk about the best ways to spend money. And, with this podcast, we talk about things like fulfillment and happiness. Peter gets into some of the ways, and these are scientifically studied, around spending money to maximize happiness. All right, so great guest, great conversation. Let's jump right in with Peter Lazaroff. All right, hey, welcome, guys. Today I have the pleasure of a guest named Peter Lazaroff. Peter knew from a young age that he had a future in investing, and today he is the Chief Investment Officer at PlanCore with over $4 billion under management. So one of the things that makes Peter really unique is his ability to simplify complex issues and explain them to just about anybody. So Peter's here today to talk to us in particular about his newest book, Making Money Simple, and overall his experience in the financial industry. So Peter, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I really like your sort of mission and vision, as I understand it, that you have a passion to really help people learn practical tips to grow wealth. You say life is complex, but finances shouldn't be. And this podcast, we're really all about growth. So this is a great topic, finance, career, wealth management. So really looking forward to talking about this.
Yeah, let's do it.
Can you Making Money Simple? Let's start with your book. Give us a high level overview of what that's about.
Well, when I was approached about writing a book, there were a handful of topics to tackle, and I've never written a book before. And admittedly, I wasn't sure that I could write one. I write all the time. I write for Wall Street Journal. I write for Forbes. I have a personal blog, but each article is anywhere from 600 to 1,000 words. And this was being proposed at being 50 to 60,000 words. And it's just a different animal. And I was worried about saying yes and then not being able to finish. And so I had a couple different concepts. One of which was investment heavy, and one of which was like, hey, how do I become financially successful? I've certainly experienced some career success myself, and I felt like, truthfully, it would be easier to write a book about how I turned my career success into financial success and how I guide people who've obviously made a good living, and how do you set yourself up to make all that pay off in your bank account. And so for me, Making Money Simple is more of a introductory level sort of goal setting piece in the first third of the book. The second third of the book really, I think, speaks to anybody in terms of investment, both theory and practice. Like, why would you invest this way? And what is investing all about? And how would you apply it in a reasonable manner? And that last third of a section is kind of getting into some of those more complex issues that you don't face routinely. So we only buy so many houses in our lives, or decide to have children so many different times in our lives, or decide to get married so many times, or estate planning, insurance. And they're really big decisions. And like a lot of things in life, when you can make a decision a number of times and get feedback, you get better over time. With these, if you mess it up, you mess it up. And that's pretty permanent. So high level, that's how I think of the book, divided into those three sections. And I think if you have had a lot of career success and you've done a good job accumulating money, perhaps the first section, which is more about how to build systems for putting away money, not necessarily where to put it, but just to make sure you don't spend it all. That's really what the first third's about. The others kind of tackle the more complex topics.
Nice. Yeah, I got a pre-read on it, and I really appreciate that. And when I first went through it, I sort of thought the same. Does the first third really apply to me? And then, for somebody who's had some career success and maybe already got past figuring out those systems to routinely make investments and squirrel it away. At the same time, one, we can always learn. There's always something to learn, and no matter how new or experienced we are, I'm sure there's something to take away. But the other thing is if you think about transitioning maybe from a wealth building phase into more of a retirement, however active,
Hmm.
work-wise that might be or not. I think a lot of people struggle with, what's the number and how big does the number need to be so that I'm certain that I ride it out, I leave something, whatever legacy I might want to have. And you've got all these uncertainties with healthcare costs and things like that. So it's almost like managing lifestyle creep and cost and things like that in the later years of our lives are not unlike the early years where we still need the same discipline.
Well, and I think if you're 65, your retirement's basically set. So as long as you have a decade, you can still make a very noticeable impact on what retirement looks like for you. And of course, retirement as a whole is changing. It's not just a 2 decade long vacation for some people. It's really getting to that point where it's financial freedom, the ability to walk away from whatever you're doing because you're tired of doing it, or doing something you're passionate about, even though it doesn't come with the same dollars as it used to, or different time commitments. It's really just using money as a tool to have control over your life and your goals and objectives. And I think one of the things that I tried to accomplish in the book, and is really resonates in all of my writing and all the content that I produce over time, is there's a lot of science in there. There's a lot of research, a lot of data. This is not a cookie cutter type deal. It is, a process. I would say that it's not magic. Financial success isn't magic, it's engineering. It's truly creating something intentionally with evidence that acknowledges both some of our human behavioral flaws, but then also acknowledges financial theory, because financial theory is really hard to ignore in the long run. It works so well, but in the short term, which feels like an eternity in the moment, you sort of let financial theory slip to the wayside.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I think a lot of the people that are my peer group or that I speak to are in that or nearing that career shift or phase of life, season of life shift, where you start to have more of the feeling of freedom, flexibility to choose whatever that might be, kind of switch gears, if you will, to what's next in the adventure. But at the same time, you've still got a responsibility to manage through that. So it sounds like it does speak to that as well. Does it also cover? I think we've talked a little bit offline about risk management, and you did mention those costly mistakes. Do you speak to kind of what those might be and managing downside risk of those big mistakes in later years?
Sure. So let's imagine you've accumulated a nice amount of savings. You got a good job, or maybe you just sold a business, or maybe you have a business that if you wanted to sell, it would bring in a bunch of money. You got to cover the basics. So you have to protect yourself, and everybody needs insurance, but the type of insurance that a lot of people end up with is overly expensive and not as efficient at maximizing your wealth as it could be, or generating as much flexibility as you could have. And so understanding the ins and outs of those basic insurance coverages, disability insurance, which is my least favorite bill I pay every year. However, statistically speaking, I'm far more likely to become disabled during my working career than I am to die. And yet everybody has life insurance. Disability insurance is the most frustrating check I write every year. Well, I guess I do it electronically, but you know what I mean. It's really frustrating because it's expensive, but kind of doing the ins and outs there again to make you understand what sort of protections you need. Estate planning is a really important thing, particularly for those who are successful. They tend to like to control things. Successful people are good delegators, but they do like to have a say. And so estate planning really takes care of a lot of those control issues that we all suffer from. I suffer from them myself as a business owner. But kind of going through those core pieces of the protection aspect, I think are a really overlooked and often in this type of book ignored issue. Most financial books, they tell you to invest and they tell you to save. I think the big differences here is I focus on some of those more technical aspects of investing, some of the bigger one-time decisions that are more complex, and that's a reflection of sort of the work that my firm does. And then finally, I actually do spend a little bit of time on how you should spend your money, because there is a lot of science behind what will give you the greatest happiness with your spending. And I think that that's a really important piece. If we're only focusing on the savings side, we have missed at least half of the equation.
That's interesting. So say more about that. What sort of spending have you seen leads to happiness and fulfillment? I think a lot of times there's this, especially in our consumerism economy and culture, it's like, you get that endorphin rush of hitting buy, hitting that purchase, and then it's gone. So
Yeah,
what are the
all
enduring ones?
retailers have so much science built into their buying process
Right.
to trigger all the right things. But let me give you a few examples. I think the one that is most pertinent and important, particularly as you're planning out your financial future, is understanding how much happier an experience will make you over a material purchase. And a material purchase could be a car or a piece of jewelry or shoes or a house. Oh my gosh, is there so much relation? There's so much research on houses. So I'll try not to go too far down that tangent. But there's a lot of research that shows that even something like an elaborate date night will bring you more lasting happiness than the new iPhone. Because when you think about it, if we're sitting in our bed and we're age 90 and we're thinking back on our lives, we're going to think about the memories, and memories are usually created by relationships, and experiences tend to do better with that. And so I remember, for example, during the last recession, going on a ski trip with friends during President's Day weekend 2009. So the market bottomed in March 2009. I was out in February 2009, and my wife knew I didn't want to go and spend the money because I just wanted to invest it. And she said, "You are really going to regret that." And you know what? This group of friends has only gotten together twice since that trip, and it was unbelievably fun. I have no idea what it cost anymore, but it's one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had. And I will truly always remember that. There are lots of things tied there. So, experiential purchases, as you're prioritizing where to spend your money, know that the science is heavy in saying that'll bring greater happiness. Again, I could spend an hour talking about that. Other quick bullet items: purchases that create time tend to bring happiness. So, that can be something like a cleaning service or mowing the lawn. The key is that you have to use that time on something that makes you happy. So if you just use it to work more, which definitely happens to a lot of us, not necessarily going to pay off. Even though this isn't quite spending, but obviously helping others is a way where the science is heavy, being charitable, giving back. That is something where there is an overwhelming amount of research that shows, you know, it's not a consumption, but it is a way of parting ways with your money that does make you happy. And so those are the three I focus the most on. And with stuff with your house, I mean, you're going to get way more happiness out of a shorter commute than you are out of a really nice kitchen or a bigger house. And so the housing one is bonkers. How crazy, how irrational we are when we come to our home purchase decisions, but really trying to acknowledge that, hey, there's been a lot of research on this stuff. Why ignore it? And I think as someone who for a living is helping people make smart money decisions, it isn't all about tax minimization and wealth maximization. Some of it should be, how do I make sure your life is better as a result of working with me?
Oh, that's awesome. Those are great reminders too. I really like the tie back when I talk about this concept of self mastery via this podcast and the things we talk about. It's really about trying to be the best possible versions of ourselves, but it's more than just about ourselves. It's about ultimately being in service to something bigger, greater, someone else. Whether it's fathering, parenting our children, whether that your interest is in serving the community or some other endeavor. So I love the tie back there to helping others. I was talking to somebody recently about there's always that really foundational investment advice of pay yourself first, financially, but we also forget oftentimes I think, to pay ourselves first with our time, right? And really, really prioritize that. But I really love the experiential emphasis. I can look back on so many of those things, and as our wealth and our financial success grows, there's always something bigger, costlier, more expensive, and shiny that you could buy. But buying those memories where you're spending time with people you care about. I was recently talking to a buddy who had great firm building success, exited a business around 40 years old, and has the luxury of a lot of free time to enjoy with his 4 children and his wife in retirement. And even that's crept up on him. And he was having a conversation with his daughter, going, there are only sort of 5 more summers before you're potentially off to university. So let's not slip that away. Let's plan out the next 5 summer vacations we're going to do.
Sounds like he read The Family Board Meeting. That's a book that talks about you only have 18 summers to connect with your children. And, I think it's a good point. My kids are still in elementary school, but I'm now frightened that soon they won't be. Whereas when you're in like the diaper stage, you just don't know what's happening and you're trying to survive. And now they're like old enough where you can really say, oh my gosh, they're not going to be here forever and not think I'm the greatest forever. And, how are they going to view my legacy, and how can I use money to equip them, whether it's like giving my kids an allowance so I can try to really teach them some of the things that are important, to how do they watch me spend my money and help others and make sure that that's important. It's all relevant.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So we sort of talked about part of the book being geared towards maybe someone at the start of their investing career, and the parts that apply with more complexity. Let's talk about the 4, 6, 8 year old investor that we have the opportunity to educate. What's your approach there?
Well, I gave my oldest child an allowance when he was 4 years old. And that usually catches people off guard. And I wrote about it, and I can't tell you how much mail I got in response to all this. And I did a lot of research in advance because I didn't want to mess them up, because we're all messing up our kids in our own special way. But here I was going to try to not make my child, you know, really flippant with money. And so with a child, I think it's important to be honest. It's important to not say, well, that's dad's domain or that's mom's domain. And we have always talked about money. And for me, it's a good practice to put what I do in as simple of terms as humanly possible. And that means if at that point in life, when he was 4, if he understood it, I felt like great. He used to walk around telling people, when they said, what's your dad do for a living? He goes, oh, my dad helps people make smart money decisions. And I'm thinking, this is the best. Got my new copywriter here to tell him.
Yeah.
Now he tells people that I help eliminate stupid human decisions. I was like, well, I'll take that, but that's a little harder. It's a little rougher around the edges. With the allowance, I'll just tell you what we did. And I tell other people, regardless of age, maybe not with teenagers exactly like this, but we went out to Bed Bath & Beyond and let him pick out 3 jars, and we decorated those jars. And on one jar, we wrote spend, on one we wrote save, and on one we wrote share. And when he was 4, he got $1 for each year of his age. And when he was 5, he got 5, and 6, he got 6. But when he was 4, we said, okay, half of the money that you get always has to go and save. $1 can go and spend, $1 can go and share. And when you turn 5, you'll get a $1 raise, and we'll let you decide what to do with it. So we were going to let him put it wherever he wanted. When he was 5, he put it in save. I was so proud. Best moment ever for dad. And when he was 6, it varied. It depended if he had a specific goal. And so for a 4-year-old, saving for the future is really hard to picture. Now, for you and I, actually, if we were to do scans of our brain, research shows that the neural patterns we would think of saving the same way that we think of giving money away to a complete stranger. So that is really powerful to think about. And when you're a child, that's even more true. And so, we in the save bucket, we printed a picture of some toy he wanted to buy, and we put it there so he remembered what he was saving for. And when we would go to the store, what slowly started happening was, it used to be, hey, Dad, can I get this? And I would respond, well, how much money do you have? Do you have money? And suddenly, that was actually the best part. He stopped asking for stuff in stores. And then I didn't have to feel like a jerk, for saying no. But also, I hear parents all the time saying, oh, we don't have money, or we don't have any money. And that's not true. And that is confusing for a child. And as they get older, they can discern the difference. We don't have money for this. And we talk, when I pay bills now, I say, this is the bill we pay to live in our house. Somebody gave us a bunch of money, and in exchange, we pay them for it. But if we didn't pay our bills on time, they would kick us out of the house. And so we have these conversations. It's been a wonderful experience. And I think it's hard to know when the right time to give a child an allowance is. By the time they're in high school, I think they definitely need to. But here's the thing is, you're not going to learn about money in high school or in college in a meaningful way. Mom and dad are the primary professors of personal money. And that doesn't mean that you have to be the expert. You need to set a good example. And you can ask your advisor for advice when they come up with a question that you don't know how to answer. But you need to allow them to make mistakes with money too. And it's much better to make mistakes with money on little dollars than big dollars. Now, one more thing, and I know this is a little bit long-winded. On the investing side of things, my grandmother gave me a share of a different stock every birthday from ages 12 to 18. It's arguably what got me interested in investing in the first place, was she gave me a share of Nike stock on my 12th birthday. And man, did that thing just take off. And it still goes up, and it's just unbelievable. I am not a big believer in individual stock investment. However, it is very tangible for a younger person to understand, even through college. And I think it's really important for students in college who have a little money to learn how hard it is to pick good stocks. They've probably been doing great during the bull market. They probably think they're geniuses, and they're going to get crushed eventually. But again, smaller dollars, and seeing the importance of investing in companies, and when you're at a young age investing in brands that really puts that sense of this is real. You are an owner of the company. You are providing them financial capital. So those are all things that I typically coach with our clients, and certainly with my own children. Now my children are not old enough where I've told them they have an investment account. All they have are index funds in their investment account. Will happily be buying them single shares of individual stocks. And I think they'll see that way how hard it is. And if they want to make mistakes, fine. They can't mess with the big piece that I've been putting away for them, but I'm happy to let them go crazy like a casino in a smaller account where they can't hurt themselves.
Yeah, small mistakes as a learning tool. So I'm really interested in the single share thing that your grandmother did, and I remember a time where you could go get that stock certificate, frame and hang a share of Disney for your child, and that made it tangible. Just having a line item with a one on it in a in some website investment account isn't quite as tangible. Do physical stock shares still exist?
They do. And you just have to plan a little bit ahead. You also have to make sure not to lose it. What's really cool about some brands is that they have perks. So if you're own a share of Disney, for example, you have perks at Disney World. They have things for shareholders. Same with Coca-Cola. Nike did not. Apple does not. But I do remember distinctly my grandmother gave me a share of Nike one year, or excuse me, of Disney one year. She did do Nike, just had a big swoosh on it. The Disney had Mickey Mouse and Goofy. It had all these people on it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Now, if you give a teenager that, they might be looking more for ESPN or Star Wars, but you get the point. They're all in the business of image, these consumer brands. Even if you got an ExxonMobil or a Chevron or, something that is less consumer brand, but still recognizable, they're not going to have as many shareholder services. But the physical share does still exist. It is a little bit of a pain to get rid of it when you grow older, but totally worth it for the learning experience.
Yeah, if you even choose to, right? You may just hang on to it as a memory. It'd be nice if somebody had given me one share of Berkshire Hathaway, and I know that comes with some shareholder benefits. I'd proudly hang that one somewhere.
Yeah, that's one that if you had to cash in, it'd be a good day.
That'd be all right. Yeah, no doubt. Well, maybe let's talk about the failure piece a little bit more. And I like the concept of teaching children about being honest and transparent and finding learning lessons. And a lot of those lessons sometimes come in failures. As long as we learn from those failures, then it's not an end state. It's just a path towards success. So is that something you talk about in your financial publications, your personal blog, or your book about some of the mistakes you've made and what you learned from those?
So, book, I talk about investment mistakes. Blog, I talk about personal mistakes a little more. In the book, in my opinion, most of investment success comes down to simply minimizing mistakes and staying the heck out of the way of compound interest. And so I do dedicate one full chapter to common mistakes investors make. And generally, it just stems from overconfidence. They chase performance. They try to time the market. They try to time when to get in and when to get out. On the personal side, I think that failure is one of the great opportunities to learn. And I probably did not view it that way until my young adulthood. Failure was not super okay when I was growing up. I'm not saying it was the end of the world. I got to eat if I failed. But I didn't want to fail. I was very competitive. I still am. However, I do view failure differently, where I'm always trying to learn. And I mentioned, even with the book, one of the things that scared me most was that I wouldn't be able to finish. I know that I am not a finisher. I am great at innovating and creating all sorts of out of the box ideas and projects and seeing them like 90% through, but then I start planning the next thing because I just can't stuff it through into the end zone. So the failures on the money side, I feel like for me personally, I've been fortunate because I took such a high interest in it that I haven't had to have a lot of struggles there. I certainly have watched other clients fail and make poor money decisions, but from a career perspective, I've really always found it important to have mentors both internally at the firm and externally from the firm. And that's helped me prevent mistakes from time to time. But I will just say my calling card, when I am going to personally fail, it's usually because I'll let my emotional response trigger before the pragmatic one. And we do a lot of testing here with our employees to know like what roles they'd fit into well and how to communicate. And my heart's on my sleeve. I'm one of the few employees that scores in a way that that I'm not hiding anything when we speak. And so I think for failures, the biggest thing for the book, I think that was hard was editing and the production. Like, what font do you want? What do you want your cover to look like? I don't care about those details. Like, let me just go. But I underestimated how much time it would take. I underestimated the amount of stress it would cause. And then in turn, how much stress that might cause in other areas of my life. And I think that the year that so my book actually came out last year, and it was the year that I decided to hire my own advisor. It was the year that I decided to get a personal coach that goes across the gamut of my life and personal and professional. It was also the year that I just became more self-aware of when I'm setting myself up for not optimal performance. So I think the book was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Previously, I would have said it was for one of these professional designations that I carry, a CFA exam, where only 20% of people who take it finish it. That was really hard. Writing a book was way worse. So that's kind of a little outline. I've talked about the struggle of writing the book on my blog and been pretty honest about that because I like people to know who I am. I'm not this robot who just makes perfect money decisions and has a nice life. All of us have our own struggles. I think it's nice when you can share those struggles and hopefully someone else can learn from them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that transparency really, that vulnerability creates a connection because nobody's perfect. We all have similar struggles, and I'm glad you brought it back to the writing of the book. I want to check out your blog on that. People say that when you feel fear, when you're afraid of something, it's a signal that it may be something that's really important to you. And rather than running from the fear, you need to lean into it and really tackle that challenge. So I had an opportunity. I've met a number of authors through this podcast, and one recently published a book that's called Fear as Fuel, or Fear is Fuel, Patrick Sweeney. And so he has studied the science through learning from scientists at Johns Hopkins and similar places about what goes on in our brain and how important it is to address fear, really chase it as something that is such a growth opportunity. So looking back on it, as hard as that was, as maybe scary as it was when you set out to do it and with the uncertainty of whether you could accomplish it, worth the effort?
It was worth the effort. I will probably do it again, which speaks volumes. But, overseeing, I want my kids to be a little older and, I oversee assets, about what's almost about $4.5 billion today at a relatively young age. It was a lot to juggle. And I think I should have brought in more help. Like I should have had someone editing every chapter as chapters were being finished. Huge lesson. That'll make life so much easier. So like trying to understand and what are the objectives of the book. I mean, it was never to be a New York Times bestseller, but I did want what to me is a fancy business card that lets people peer into my world a little bit and know me a little bit better and allows it to open doors. And in that sense, it's been tremendously successful. And I 100% would do it all over again, just maybe a little more efficiently.
No, that's great to hear. And the other thing you said there is you're effectively following your own advice in spending money to free up time, which is awesome. So on the mindset piece, before maybe we get into some wrap up, things are volatile right now. There's crazy stuff going on in the world, and we're seeing that swing both directions in the market. How do you stay calm?
Well, I think in that sense, I am a robot. So I know how I personally stay calm. I never check my portfolio. So despite overseeing about $4.5 billion, I personally have all of my money in a single fund that's globally diversified and rebalances on its own. And for me, I don't believe that there's a perfect portfolio out there. I think there's just the one that you can stick with for as long as possible. And part of my job is to look at new funds every day. And if I changed it up, I would be changing my portfolio all the day because I see all these great research ideas. And, I just tried to keep it simple and do something I know I could stick with. And on my 50th birthday, I'm going to, make a tweak that I've already defined. And then after that, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. However, When the market goes down a lot, I acknowledge and I know in advance that the market's going to go down a lot, similar magnitude and frequencies as it has in the past. I just never know why. And clients come all the time concerned about different things. 12 months ago, they would have pointed to politics or the trade war or some other sort of nuanced thing in the economy because they read some article in the newspaper about it. And my response is usually, hey, like we've built a plan that acknowledges markets fall 10, 20, 30, sometimes 40, 50%. It's in your financial plan. You don't have to do anything. Here's what we do when that happens. We're going to rebalance. We're going to tax loss harvest to get you some tax benefits. We're going to look for opportunities to cut costs in the portfolio. But in reality, we don't know the reason why this is all going to happen. And 12 months ago, nobody would have said it was the coronavirus that was going to do this. And, there have been recessions. This is just honestly, at this point, it's a run of the mill downturn. Could it turn into something else? Of course it could, but nobody knows. It's the way that market activity works. It's not so linear and that A causes B and as a result, B causes C. It is far more complex than that. There's actually a biology sort of discipline called complex adaptive systems that talks about how millions of independent inputs are always going to behave differently. So if you've ever been you're in San Diego, so you're by the beach in the sand. If you make a pile of sand and you're pouring a bucket and it makes this big mound and eventually the sand sort of avalanches and cascades down the sides. There was a physicist, Phil Bach, who replicated to the exact precision of pour speed and temperature and surface. And the thing is, he couldn't get the sand pile to avalanche at the same time ever because each little grain of sand is so different and it interconnects and interacts with different people differently. And honestly, that is a lot of what the stock market is. Complex adaptive systems is a huge rabbit hole that's probably not super interesting to most people. But once you see the market through this lens, you recognize that prediction is completely futile. And you're better off planning on downturns occurring than trying to predict them. And I think that you can plan for them quite effectively. And the best thing you can do is just not look. Find something else to do. If you had money that you needed to come out of the market in the next, say, 1 to 5 years, that money should not be in stocks. It should be in bonds or cash. And most bear markets last on average 2 years. So, it's not to be dismissive. It is definitely big swings, and we've had an unusually low volatility bull market run. And so the next recession, whenever it is, or the next big dip, whenever it is, maybe we're in the midst of one, maybe we are not, it's going to feel scary. And that's totally normal. And our human instinct is to run. If we're cavemen and we hear a rustle in the bushes and we stand there to calculate the probability of it being a lion, we got eaten. Those species of humans did not survive. We just ran. And in investing, it's that same tendency that, while from an evolutionary standpoint was super helpful, is the exact opposite of what you want to be doing with your investments. So, fortunately, we don't have to worry about being eaten by lions, but we do have these responses where we want to do something. And it's really hard for us to accept that sometimes the decision to do nothing is a choice, is an action. But if nothing else, I would say if you're worried about your portfolio now or anytime, the better course of action is usually to go review the underlying assumptions in your financial plan, because those are all things you can control. And if it's been a while, maybe things have changed. That's really going to determine whether you're successful or not. And this volatility, these losses, that is the cost of the higher returns you earn in stocks. So if you put all your money in cash and you could somehow save enough for retirement, that would be wonderful. But unfortunately, that's not going to work. It would require an unbelievable savings rate. And so investing is all about trying to outpace inflation without taking unnecessary risks. Stocks tend to earn more than bonds and cash over time because they are riskier. So this is the cost of those higher equity returns, those higher stock returns. If I just said that and left it alone, that's the robot response. I acknowledge it's scary. That's why you need somebody or a system. If you don't have somebody there to keep you to stay on the course, you do need a system to stay the course. Fortunately, there's a lot of good technology out there that allows for that. On the other hand, most of Wall Street wants you to believe you can do it by yourself, because 95% of trades is institutional traders. And if we're playing poker and we can invite a bunch of dumb people to the table, we want them to come to the table so we can take their money. That's what Wall Street really wants from you. And that's what the financial media wants from you, because they want you, your eyeballs, to sell advertisements. So a lot of things working against us. The best course of action, again, either is to call your advisor, pick up the phone, call your advisor. If you don't have an advisor, hire an advisor. And, when you're talking to your advisor, review those underlying assumptions of your financial plan.
Nice. I like that you have that mention of what's actually controllable. And yeah, just taking it back to the fear element that you mentioned for a moment. Yeah, most of us are not dealing with mortal fears. And so again, it goes back to, well, maybe fear is a healthy response in this case. We need to potentially hold the course, look for opportunity. And yeah, I mean, the truth of the system is it is so complex, but our brain is wired to try to simplify things and look for patterns. As you said, we can't stand there waiting for the lion to eat us. We got to make a snap decision of all these millions of data points and then just act and move. But yeah, if it's a decision based on emotion, if it's a decision based on maybe false patterns or assumptions, or if it just comes back to the stress and worry thing, and these things are beyond our control, then if we can't affect it, then I'm not really sure it's worth worrying about. Honestly, this week, somebody made a comment to me about how much the market was down or how much the market was up, and I said, "Oh wow, really?" The truth is, I had no clue because I'm not looking, and I never do. It's there. It's got a plan, and advisors and professionals are working the plan. And quite honestly, I had a conversation with a client about the coronavirus, and my response was somewhat similar. Is like there are a lot of unknowns. It's evolving. It's not something I can control, and so I'm just going to focus on what I do control, and that's kind of where my focus lies.
Yeah, wash your hands and don't look at your portfolio. I think that's about all we can do.
Sum it up that way. That's a great summary. Well, usually I like to wrap with a few actionable items, and I think you've given us a ton of them here throughout. Focus on controllable decisions. If you don't have a planner, get one. Look at a plan and work the plan. And then we also talked about. I really love the point about happiness and fulfillment and some of the things you can focus on financially to accomplish that. Anything else that comes to mind when I ask for actionable advice?
Sure. Well, I developed a quick assessment called smartmoneyquiz.com. It's 9 questions. And what it does is your responses tailor the resources that I give you. So I've been writing for a long time, and the book only captures what I feel like is half of my knowledge base. And so if you go through that process and you answer the questions, what it'll do is it'll point to areas if there is a true area of concern and be like, hey, you really ought to consider doing X, Y, or Z. And here's a bunch of resources about that decision that will help you make it in a smart manner. So I think if you're unsure where there's an opportunity to improve your life, smartmoneyquiz.com is a reasonable thing to do. My hope is that I've designed it well enough that I can even give the person who's just knocking it out of the park something to think about. The other thing, I've alluded to many times that go talk to your advisor, or the fact that even I hired my own advisor last year because I don't really have time to take care of myself. And it's nice to have an objective third party to bounce ideas off of. The one thing I will tell people is that I'm obviously biased in saying you should have an advisor because, I own a wealth management firm. So why wouldn't I say that? I used to mow my lawn too, and I never killed my grass, and it looked pretty good. It was relatively healthy, but I definitely made life hard on myself occasionally because I didn't mow the grass some Saturday and then it ended up raining on Sunday, or I just simply didn't feel like doing it and it got too long. And I remember when I hired a professional, again, I didn't kill my grass, but the professional made it look good and it was healthier because he was seeding strategically and cutting the grass in different directions and, different lengths depending on how much sunshine there was. Anything in life that you hire a coach or a professional for is going to improve the outcome. And it's a big investment in yourself to hire an advisor. Hiring an advisor is not cheap, and hiring a bad advisor is very harmful. So it's not an easy decision, but I do want to say that if you don't have somebody, you should consider it. I do have a full chapter dedicated to the different types of advisors in the book. It's also something you can find on my website. And I'm fairly certain that when you go through smartmoneyquiz.com, that usually it provides you with the worksheet of how to hire an advisor, which again walks you step by step through how would you collect a couple different names to evaluate? What is a way that scientifically is shown to remove bias from your decision and score people similarly? And so that's a resource that I think can be pretty helpful to people.
Oh, that sounds super cool. I look forward to checking it out. We can all improve. We can all learn something, and certainly we can all benefit from the help of professionals and coaches. Every professional athlete has a coach for a reason. As a parent, you realize that oftentimes there are things that unbiased third party, that coach or that uncle or someone else your child will listen to when they won't listen to mom or dad. So smartmoneyquiz.com. Where else can people find you and learn more in terms of your website, your blog, social media, and the Making Money Simple book?
Well, it's hard to spell my last name, but if you Google Peter Lazaroff, Google's pretty smart. My website's peterlazaroff.com. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Peter Lazaroff. I think I have a YouTube channel, Peter Lazaroff, and I shoot, little 3-minute videos when stuff like the market goes wild. And I think Smart Money Quiz, if you're afraid of spelling the word Lazaroff or the name Lazaroff, is a safe place to go. The book is anywhere they sell books. It's cheapest on Amazon for whatever that's worth, but it is in the bookstores too, but it's full price. So heads up.
Perfect. No, I look forward to it. I got a pre-read on the PDF, but I'm going to go pick up the hardback on Amazon and check out the quiz. I really appreciate your time and the insight. It's always fun talking to people who seem like they have a very sort of straightforward profession, but then you get to the philosophy and the personality, like you said, behind it. It's not a robot. There's always cool stuff to learn.
Well, this was great, Michael. Thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. I will get links to all your contacts out in my show notes for this one, so people can either Google or just link right to it, and hopefully contact you and learn more. All right, super cool one with Peter Lazaroff. You can find the show notes at manofmastery.com/047, and go check Peter out. I really like the idea of his blog where he talks about personal mistakes. And obviously learning from those mistakes, financial and personal and otherwise. And go check out his financial quiz, follow him on social. And then next week, really the next few weeks, as we come up to episode 50 here, milestone episode 50, we got some really cool stuff coming on. But until then, look, just stay safe and healthy out there. Get your rest, your sleep, your hydration. Eat well, eat right, get sun, get some fresh air, get some exercise at home, but be smart about helping do your part to contain this thing. Take care of yourself and your families. And until then, we will catch you guys next week.